Hello, Lizzy here from Lizzy Curtis Designs, and today I'm going to show you how to make Nicola. And Nicola is this pattern here. So it's a beautiful and unusual pouch with 3 pockets actually. Well, pocket out on each side on the outside, and then obviously the main compartment on the inside. So that's what the pattern looks like when you download it, and this is what it looks like in real life. And it's quite unusual. I've got lots of beads in mine, you'll hear them rattling. So yes, it's quite unusual in as much that you've got this wonderful shape that goes around from the top to of the zip here, right the way through up to the other side. So it's one piece all the way through. You can see what it looks like on the bottom. Now there's actually multiple ways that you can put that gusset in. I'm going to show you one way today, but as we get through it, I'll talk to you about the other ways. The other thing is you need to consider perhaps where your zips are. So for instance, on here you've got the zips going from right to left, from left to right, which is good for me as a right-handed person, and you'll find that because of that, one side looks, and if I tilt it you'll see that there's a zip slider here and 2 zip sliders here, and that's because on the opposite side I need to also go left to right. So you might want to think about how the zips look, and whether if you want all the zip sliders to be on one end, then the one that you turn around, it'll go right to left. It sounds a bit complicated, probably more complicated than it needs to be, but that's how it works. It's made with a foam interfacing, like I use Bosal. You can use iron-on or you can use sew-in. It doesn't really matter, because all of the stitching that we're going to do on this lovely bag pouch, in actual fact you could put a strap on it if you wanted to, that would be quite nice. It sort of holds all the foam together with the project, and we do it as one layer. So let me quickly show you the sort of prep that you need to do. So let me show you the pattern pieces first. So let's get, oh, that's it, they're stuck together because I've used some 505. I'll talk to you about that in a sec. So the pattern you get looks like this, and you stick the 2 halves together so they go down the center like that. There's a little flap that you can put some glue on. So this is the main outer body shape that you need, and this is the pocket shape. And the way we stitch the pockets is that you're going to have the fold of the fabric along there, so you get a sort of double piece of fabric. I'll show you as we go along. And then on the gusset, now I've glued these together. Well, I've put 505 on, and it's so sticky. Be careful, we can undo it. There we go. So the 2 pieces again stick together. Because I've put 505 on, you can hear it's tacky. It saves me pinning, and it sticks onto my fabric really flat, which means I can use a rotary cutter to cut my fabric. You may not want to do that. You can obviously pin your pattern pieces, but that's your gusset, and you need outer lining and wadding of some sort. I do suggest Bosal. When you cut the Bosal, it wants to be 3/8 of an inch smaller all the way around on all of the pieces. So for the outer piece here, what I suggest you do is draw on your Bosal around your pattern piece, and then draw another line about 3/8 of an inch in, not 1/4 inch, I would make it 3/8 all the way around, and cut that, and then you need 2 of those for the outsides. For the pocket, I'm using a G700, a soft iron-on interfacing, just to give the pockets a little bit of structure, but not too much. You don't need it to be overbearing. So that's basically the rules, if you like, for cutting out the pattern pieces and to interface. So if we look, for instance, at the pockets, hold on, let me get one of the pockets here, and I've got some really lovely fabrics by oh, is it Poppy? I think it is. I'd look at the selvage, except it's not near me. So I've got the chickens on here. So you get 2, so you cut on the fold, so you get 2 halves to it like that. and on this outer half you're putting your G700. Fold it over, crease it well, because we're going to stitch the zip onto that piece there. So I've got the other one for the other side there. For the outers, we've got the outer fabric, the lining fabric, and we've got the bosal in between. Now I've stitched mine down so all of my raw edges are joined together. I find that much easier to stitch, but inside there is my bosal, and it doesn't quite go to the 1/4 inch. It is definitely a 3/8 of an inch shorter all the way around. I've used a little bit of 505 to hold it in place, but when you consider we're going to put a pocket on top and a zip and some binding, then it does hold it all together, so don't worry too much about all of that. Okay, you then need your 3 zips, and I've got one to stitch so you can see what that looks like. So each one is cut to a certain measurement, and then you need tabs on all the ends, and it says in the pattern what you need to cut. And once you've stitched these on, you can then trim them. So for this one, for instance, all I need to do is trim them back. You can do it afterwards if you want, but this does give you a good guide of where you're going to stitch for your 1/4 inch seam allowance if you trim it back. So that's the 3 zips done. So like I say, you might want to consider where you put your slider, whether you're putting it on the left. So if we look at the front of the bag, the zip slider would be on the left, and for me that makes it easy for me to pull open. So you just need to consider that. You need 2 of these to go on each end of the zip, and I'm going to show you how to stitch that on. So we'll put those to one side for the moment. And we've got 2 pieces of binding. Again, I should tell you that all the measurements in the pattern, and this is to cover up the zip edge of the zip tape on the outside of the bag. You obviously will see it as we go along. And when you press this, do use a clapper to actually make sure that that is really super duper pressed flat. Okay, and you need 2 of those. In this case, I'm going to put tape on, bias binding, and I've just doubled it up as you would if you were making a quilt, binding a quilt. So I'm going to stitch it that way. In the example that I've already made here, so if I open this up, this is actually, I've got my beads in there, but let's just show you from the overhead. You can see I've done a French seam, so that is a very, very good option. So you could use a French seam that goes inside, or you can have a French seam on the outside. You could just do the inside and zigzag it to make it neat, or you can bind it, and you can bind it from the inside, or you can bind it on the outside. Today we're going to bind it so it goes inside. I'm not sure about having the binding on the outside. I think it could look really lovely, but you've got to be so neat and tidy with it. Okay, so my suggestion is go with the option that suits you. You might find popping it under your overlocker might work. You're nowhere near the hardware, so you should be fine with your overlocker, or just pop a little zigzag stitch through, and again, that's a lovely way to neaten off a beautiful, beautiful project like Nicola. Okay, so where do we begin? Well, the first thing we need to do is just to finish off our zips, as I said before. So I've got 2 already done, and this is the 3rd one. Now, there's lots of ways that you can finish this zip end off. You could bring the teeth together and do a little hand stitch, or you can machine stitch those edges together, the teeth, so they stay still. But the easiest option is to lay it onto your fabric like that. We're doing a 1/4 inch seam allowance. You're going to put the other one just over the top. So you're encapturing it. I don't know. You're incorporating it. I don't know, I've lost the word. And then I just use a clip directly on top of the teeth, and that holds it perfectly in place. So let's just stitch that. So it's 1/4 inch seam allowance, and you're just going straight over the top. Just make sure that your teeth are still sitting together. Let's turn the stitch length down, So you just got a seam like that going straight across the top. You're just going to flip it back, line up your edges like that, and then you're going to just top stitch very, very closely to your seam. If you want to press it beforehand, please do. Okay, and that'll hold all of your ends in place. If you're not sure about these loose ends here, another little top tip is just to put a few stitches in the top, and that holds all your layers together perfectly. And then all we need to do is just trim that away. So when we do stitch it into our pouch, we've got our 1/4 inch. Well, it's much more visual that you can see your 1/4 inch. So for instance, if I hold that up now, you can see that we're just going to just go from up here, straight up here, without worrying about the width sticking out of the sides. You know, that's all been neatly cut away. It's ideal. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do, we'll just go back to the overhead again, is that we're going to put the zip onto the pocket. So don't forget about where you're going to have your zip slider. You can keep it in the middle like that. You can open it up if you want to, whatever suits you. You need to find the middle of your pocket and the middle of the zip. So if we get our pen, so I've already made a mark for the middle of my pocket, just here. And to find the middle of your zip, just literally fold it in half. Make sure that your seams are matching here, and then just bring it back and make a mark. In fact, that's on the inside. We could really do with it being on the outside. So let's do that. And do the other side just as a visual. Just want to check that again. Let me do the zip, there we go. Yeah, happy with that. So literally you've got a mark in the middle, you've got a mark in the middle of your zip. Now if you want to, you could put quilter's tape on there. So let's do that, and we won't always be using that, but we'll do it so you can see how useful quilter's tape is. Because we've got the fold of the fabric, we don't have to worry about placing the fabric over the top of the zip. We're literally going to place it like that. It just absolutely could not be easier. So let's get the end of this. And you could go right up to the end. You know, sometimes it's not necessary because this method particularly, if you have zip phobia, if there's such a thing, then you'll love this project, because doing the folded piece of fabric like we've done makes it so much easier. So we've put our tape down, and then all I'm going to do is peel that back. So just if you get your thumb and just scratch the end of the tape, it'll easily lift off. Find the centres and match that up first, and you just want a little bit of a gap. Don't put it right up to the teeth, because you've got to be able to open the zip up okay. Now before we go any further, do we want the zip slider on the right? I don't, so actually that ought to be the other way round. So let's just pull that off, and I'm going to take the tape off, and I'm going to reposition it on the other side. And yes, you can do that as long as you're careful. It's like everything, isn't it? Just take it steady. Obviously it's going to be a little bit sticky, so just take your time. That zip slider keeps getting in the way. These particular zip sliders have big, very loose, I can't describe it, very big openings, and they flop about everywhere. They're quite annoying actually, but they're really nice, pretty little zip sliders, very useful for hanging things off. So once again, we're going to marry up our centre position and actually glue that down. And then all you're going to do is whatever width you've decided here between the edge of your fold and the teeth, just continue all the way along There's no sort of rules about that. Just make sure that it looks nice. If, for instance, you're not using the quilter's tape, you might find it actually easier. There we go. So there is our zip glued down. So now obviously all we need to do is to stitch this, and we'll do the same. In fact, let's do the other one now. So don't forget, I'm going on the left, so I can pull it across with my right hand, which is natural for me. So let's do this one. This time I've got it on the right side. Let me get rid of that zip slider. We'll use tape again. So all the way along. And don't get too hung up about the tape and if it's exactly positioned, as long as you've got it a little way away from the teeth. The two reasons: A, you don't want to stitch that near to your teeth of your zip, and secondly, you don't want it to show. You just don't want it to show. So either way, just keep an eye on that. Keep it right to the edge. So once again, we need to find the center. So I'm going to use my other one. Find the center. So here, find the center. So we just, in fact, I've made a mark here already. There we go. So I'm just going to place the two marks over the top of each other. Try to get these zips looking the same. So start in the centre, work out to the edge, and again on this side. And you'll find that the zip slider always distorts your zip, so just work around that. So that's our two pockets with the zips stuck. Okay, now we'll stitch them on. So bring the machine in. So this is definitely the easiest way of installing a zip with the folded fabric. Look out for your zip slider. Obviously it could get in your way, but I've got a really small zipper foot here that I use practically for everything, and it should sail by as long as you're not too near the teeth. So top stitch this all in place. That's the first one. Let's just repeat that. Try and keep your zip tabs straight. So there we are. So we've attached the zip really easily, nice and straight. You might find it easier with quilter's tape or without. I let you decide. But to actually stitch a folded piece of fabric onto your zip is actually a really easy way of putting a zip in, and I don't even have to take my slider off. It's sitting perfectly well away from the teeth. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is to actually attach this to the bag front. So my lining is just as beautiful as the outer, but I've decided that's going to be my lining and this is my outer, and I think it goes really well with my chickens. So my pocket sits really well over the top of that, and you'll think, well, hold on a minute, what about this zip? Well, we're going to put the binding in, but the first thing I want to do is to actually attach the pocket. So, and you can do this afterwards or you can do it now, which I'm going to do it now. So just make sure that when you look at it, all of this is pretty straight, so it's all equal all the way along. To be honest, that could come up a little bit. It's a little bit wonky, but I'm just going to ignore it. This end is perfect. Look at that end, it's gorgeous. We can trim that off in a minute. So when we've got it in position, what I suggest is you get some clips. Because we're dealing with lots of layers of fabric, I quite like clips when we're dealing with lots of layers. And we're going to stitch the pocket and the zip onto the bag front and back. Okay, so that's that one. So when we take it to the machine, we're going to stitch about less than 1/4 inch, because that's our seam allowance. So just under, maybe 1/8 of an inch, maybe just that little bit more. And we're going to attach the two pieces together. So let's get the next one. So you don't see much of this fabric unless you open the zip. And when you open the zip as the pocket, you'll obviously see more. Yeah. As long, if you get what I mean now, we'll have a look later anyway. So just line up your pocket with your outer. As I said, try and make sure that it's kind of equal distance there. Just make sure it's sitting directly on top. And I have stay stitched, as I said, or basted the outer pocket and the lining, etc. together, just so I haven't got lots of loose layers. You could do the same with your pocket if you want to, baste it around just so it holds the layers together. It's much easier. Okay, so there's our two pockets with on the main fabric, on the outer fabrics. So we're going to stitch those in place. So we're going to baste them. So I'm going to increase my stitch length to 4, so you kind of will whiz along if you've done that. So just remember that this machine will go faster because your stitch length is longer. You might want to use a walking foot because you've got lots of layers. So take it all the way around. And if you want to, when you've done this, just trim it so it's your layers are all neat. But we're going to bind it, so everything should be nice and neat and covered. And then just come up to the top like that. So you can see that our pocket is attached now to the outer. We've still got this part to do. We'll do that next. Let's do the other one. So you can take the clips out as you go, just hold your fabrics. You could use a stiletto if you want to. Just keep your fingers away from the needle. Just guiding your fabric. As I say, a walking foot is definitely a good option for all of this project because of the layers and yeah. Just makes it easier. So there is our second pocket on the back end. Isn't that fabric gorgeous? So let's put our clips away for the moment. Okay, so now we're going to move on to our binding, which, as I said, I've already done. It's gorgeous and flat, and all we're going to do is pop it over the top of our zip just to neaten. And if you do it in the same fabric as your outer fabric here, it kind of disappears. We are going to top stitch it both sides though of our zip, so on the inside and the outside. So you're going to get two lots of tram lines if you like. Now the dimensions I've given you means that it's going to overhang each side. That's perfectly fine, gives you a little bit of leeway, and we're just going to stitch it straight down onto our project. So once again, you could use quilter's tape to hold the whole thing down, or you can just go for it. And you know what? I think I might just go for it. I think what I'll do is put a couple of clips on, if they'll fit. They just about go. I'm not sure that's going to be of any help, but let's do it anyway. Just those two there will do. So let's pop it over onto the machine. So we're top stitching, but we do need a little bit of security. So I'm going to take my stitch length down to about 2.75. I'm just going to line up the first part of my binding and start stitching. Once again, we are a little bit away from the zip slider here. Okay, just there. So you might want to open up your zip. Do it that way. You know, you could tape this down. You can stick it down with your quilter's tape. You could pin this. You could pop a pin in there just to make sure that, because we've opened up the zip, it's a little bit more vulnerable. So I can pop a pin in. So I can get it in, there we go. So I can pop a pin in just to hold that down. You can pin that all the way along, or you can look at your machine and see if your machine foot will pass the zip slider, just so you don't break a needle or get yourself into trouble. So let's see how we get on. It was close, but I was okay. I prefer a closed zip. So all the way along. Again, you might want to use your stiletto just to hold it all in place. You can just use that, keeps your fingers away from the needle. Let's take those clips out. I'm not sure they're of any help whatsoever. I find it easier to line up when I haven't used quilter's tape, but it's a personal thing, isn't it? So there's our first lot of stitching done. So now we're going to do the second lot of stitching, and that just covers up your zipper tape perfectly. Way along. There we are. That's what it looks like. Really lovely and neat. It's quite close to where the zip edge is. You could make your pocket shorter if you want to see more of your outer pocket, but by the time we've put the zip in, it'll look something like that. So let's do the other side. So let's pop the tape on, the binding I should say. We know we've got about a ½ inch play each end, so I'm not going to worry. I'm going to go past my slider carefully. There we go, no problem at all. Now I always go quite quickly on a demonstration, so we can make this up quite quickly. But of course you're going to take a lot more care. And I know that our Nicola will make a super job of our Nicola. That's who the bag was named after. I can't remember why now. She'll tell me. She'll remind me. So just be careful of your zip slider again. Make sure that piece of metal stays out of the way of your needle. So all the way along. There we go. You can see what that looks like now. Really lovely and neat. Okay, so the next thing is to actually put the main zip in, which again is so super easy. So there we have our pockets done. I've trimmed off the ends. You can see they're lovely and neat on the end there now. And all we have to do is to put our zip in. So this is our main zip. So once again, we want to think about where you want to have your slider, whether you want it to the left and pull it to the right, like that, or the other way round. So it does depend on whether you're right or left-handed. Now this time we're going to do what, let's say it's a traditional way, and we're putting the right side of our fabric onto the right side of the zip. But as I said, you must watch all of your zip sliders and this sort of hangy bit here, which on mine is so loose and floppy that it could easily get in the way. We're literally going to turn it over and we're going to stitch that down. Now you have got a raw edge here, so you might want to zigzag that, make it neat. You could run it under your overlocker if you've got an overlocker, again just to make that super neat, you know, we're going to glue the rest of our zip down. I'll show you what I mean when we're finished, and we're going to trim it back, so don't worry too much about that raw edge at the moment, okay? But it's something that you could definitely consider. The other option, and I forgot to mention this right at the beginning, you could stitch your outer and your lining together along that top, fold it back, and then you would also have a very neat edge on the top there. And then you can do this exactly the same as how we did the pockets, by just laying that folded edge over the top of your zip and then top stitching down. So there are lots of options with this, and what I want you to do is to find the best way for you. So let's find the middle of our zip again. So we're folding it in half, we're marking here and here. We've got this mark already that we made on the pocket, so I'm just going to transfer that to the top of my bag here. So it was here, so now it's here. And then that's how we're going to marry up or line up our zip and our pocket. So place them so they're sitting together, and then just flip. It doesn't matter which one you flip, it can be the fabric or it can be the zip, and I'm just going to pop a pin in. Now try to keep your seam allowance to 1/4 inch on here. Now you might be tempted to go really close to your zipper teeth, but you haven't got a lot of room from the top of the pocket down, so I would stick to a 1/4 inch or less. It's about 3/8 to go closer to your teeth, and some people actually do like that. If you want to go closer, that's fine. You could adjust your fabric just to make sure that you've got a little bit of a gap between the binding and the top of the zip. So I've pinned it all the way along, so I've got some sort of idea of where I'm stitching. And I'm going to actually flip it over and stitch from the back, because I can feel the zipper teeth when I do that, whereas if I do it on this side, you've got the flat part of the tape and you can't feel the zip teeth so well, so I am going to flip it over. So stitch length down to 2.5 again, which is pretty normal for anything like this. Of course I've put my pins on the wrong side. And we're going to start off with a back stitch this time, just to secure that. I really want to make sure I'm nowhere near zip sliders. So let's just take the pins out. So if you think about where you put your pins, rather than on the wrong side for me anyway. So all the way along. So you can see there are huge amounts of alternatives for this beautiful pouch, and I think once you've made one, you'll come up with a way that suits you more. And it's very difficult for me to give you all of the alternatives. So you can see I move my slider. I don't trust that slider at all. So a little back stitch at the end there. So if I flip it over now, you can see how that looks. So let's just have a look at the end of it like that. Okay, and then obviously our zip comes all the way over. Now don't cut this off just yet. I just want you to line up the middle rather than the ends. That way you get a perfect fit. So we're going to do the same again. And just make sure everything is lying nice and flat. I've got the centre point of my fabric here, centre point of my zip here, so it doesn't matter, as I said before, how you flip it on. Let's do it that way, is as long as that fabric centre and I've got two marks there, yes, that one there, fits on top of the centre of your zipper tape, then you're good to go. Again, we're stitching on, for me, I'm going to stitch on the wrong side, on my lining side, because then I can feel my zipper teeth here, although I'm going to be well away from the teeth. I'm quite happy with that. So let's pin it all the way along. You could use clips if you want to, because you know we are dealing with lots of layers. You could make sure that your sides do sit nicely on top of each other, and then just, as I say, stitch all the way along. And once again, I'm going to move my slider out of the way. They are floppy and they're more likely to flip and get in my way. So I'm going to start off and then I'm going to move my slider. You must never be worried about zips. Zips are super easy. There's just a few kind of rules, if you like. It's just watching, being respectful of your machine, I suppose, just watching the slider and where your slider is in relation to your needle. But it's just a case of watching it. It's not a case of, you're not going to break anything unless you get that slider in the way. So again, I'm going to lift up my foot of my machine here. Just here, I'm lifting up my foot. Let me just move it so you can see. Take it to the front if you want, like this, and then you can move your slider the other side of your needle, and that's, now you know you're secure. By doing a 1/4 inch seam allowance, you're nowhere near the teeth of your zip. And because we have cut our foam down by 3/8 of an inch, it means you've got lovely flat fabric to sew with and not bulky foam. That's the reason why we cut it back. So, nice little back stitch just to secure all of that. And then that's what we've got. Okay, now as I said, if you want to go closer to here, you're going to lose more of this fabric. So by all means stitch closer. I mean, I love to see zips. I don't know why, but I do. But you could use a smaller seam allowance on your fabric so it brings it closer to the teeth of your zip. So you don't have to have the raw edge of your fabric to the edge of the zipper tape. You can bring it in a bit. But I'm really happy with how that looks. So again, mine is very similar to the one I made before. So let me just show you that. In as much that I've got my zip sliders, these are a little bit more robust and they don't wriggle around as much as the other ones. So my zip sliders are definitely over to the right of my pouch, and then when I do flip that round, again the zip slider is on the left and it's easy for me with my right hand to pull the slider. Okay, so that's what it looks like. I love that fabric. So now we've got the time we're going to put our gusset in. We're going to trim these ends off, so let's just do that. Okay. Now in the pattern, I'll just quickly show you. Let's just get rid of that. In the pattern on your gusset piece, you've got a little dot here and the same at the other end, and then you've got dots here, but that you've got the join anyway, and that you want to make those marks on your fabric. Now because I'm using directional fabric, I've cut my piece and then added a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I've joined it, so my chickens are going out, so it means that up the sides of my pouch, if I show you at the front, I've got my chickens going right this way and my chickens going right that way, so it means that everything is looking okay, but I've done a join in the center there. So you have to think about how you're placing your chickens or whatever it is. So let's get rid of the pattern pieces again. So you need to line up all these pieces. On the actual outer piece, you've got obviously the middle section where you've joined your patterns. So once again, use your pen. Let's go on the overhead. So get your pen and just pop it onto your piece that you've stitched. Make sure the sides, they're all sitting okay. Just bring it out a bit and just make a mark. Do the same on the other side, so line up, pull it back a bit so you can see, make a mark. These are crucial. You've then got the centre mark here. Don't worry if this is a little bit jiggly-jaggedy here, which mine is because I'm rushing, but that's your centre mark here in the centre of this zip, the middle zip, and again you've got the centre mark here. Okay, that's your marks. So what you need to do is, now we're going to put the binding on the inside of the bag. Okay, so when we look at the bag from here, we've got a nice clean seam, and on the inside we're going to have the binding. So remember how you're going to stitch this pretty much as normal. So it's going to be right sides together and we'll turn through, and then we'll put the binding on. So we're going to baste it in place first perhaps, and then we're going to put the binding on. I'm not going to attempt to put the binding on first time. I think that would be a little bit too difficult. So as I say, right sides together. So you need to get the end of one of your ends and find the center point and pop it so it matches up with the piece. So if I get a pin Now you can obviously pin those specific areas. So if I hold it up like that, you can see. If I show you on the overhead, you can see. So you can pin those specific areas so they sit in place, or use a clip. Clips are actually quite more preferable when it's bulky, but you also want to make sure that the center pieces are matched up as too. So I'm going to put a clip in because I much prefer clips, well, when we're doing bulky. Right sides together, as I said, because we're going to put the binding on the inside of this pouch. So I'm going to swap those pins at the top there for clips. So you can see straight away that your pouch is coming together, starting to look okay. So match those ends up again, pop your clip in, and then of course what you can do is to actually marry the whole thing up. So all the way around you could put clips. Oh, let's do it and then you can see what I mean. I think in the pattern it does actually show you quite clearly, but let's do it anyway. So I would find the halfway point. Now I want you to see something. Because I haven't basted my gusset, you can see that my fabric is flapping open, so you might want to baste this all the way around. So you're only dealing like with the outer, like almost one piece of fabric, but just go with it for the moment. So just get all your raw edges together and pop a clip in, and this will fit absolutely perfectly. So just bring your raw edges together. Let's do it. I think basting the gusset would be a very good plan. So that's 1/4 done. You can see what that looks like. Let's do the other side. So again, keep your raw edges sitting nicely on top of each other. Now there is a little bit of trickiness going around this curve here, but just take your time. Stick to a 1/4 inch seam allowance if you can, or just under, because we're going to bind it. So again, just bring your raw edges together. Let's just move that. Hold on. There we go. Okay, that's the other 1/4 done. See how it looks? So let's start from the top this time. Now when you start stitching, can I suggest you start from the very top? So in other words, where the zip is. You start from here. It's not quite lying that flat, but you're starting from here and you're working around that way. You might want to do it in stages. You could hand baste it first. I know. Who thought you'd ever hand baste again after school days? Right, so just as I say, get all these raw edges sitting nicely. I'm just having a look at my fabric, making sure that it is. And it is worth spending a little bit of time on this process. Okay, and then we've just got this one to do. Just need a couple of more clips. So again, just bring that together. So it's quite an easy make, but it's just got this little some fiddly bits, and also you need to consider how you're going to finish it off. But you could just stitch this around now and zigzag it and make it super neat, or even put it under your overlocker. It is fiddly at the top here, that's all I'm going to say. With an overlocker you need to have confidence. It would work, but you just need a little bit of confidence. So there is our gusset attached to our pouch. This needs to be a little bit flatter, so when I start stitching it I'm going to open that zip part there so it lays flat. Okay, let's take it to the machine. Now, if you have a free arm machine, this is not, but if you have a free arm machine, you might find this a whole lot easier. So let's start on the top edge, as I said before. Now, I find it easier to stitch the gusset facing me rather than the bag facing me, but you might want to swap it around at some point. As I said, you might want to do this in stages. So let's just get our seams lying nice and flat. And of course, because it's squidgy, you can lay it flat, you can push it down. Now, you're not going to see very much at all, and I do apologise for that, but I need to be able to stitch it, and I can't have the camera in front as it will get in my way. So let's just start putting this together. So be careful you don't stretch anything, and whatever happens at the end, you can trim the fabrics to make them neat. Before, maybe you zigzag, that type of thing. So there's lots of ways that you can finish this off to make it look super duper neat. So just take your time, work your way around, make sure your raw edges are sitting together. If it wants to wriggle, I'm using my stiletto now to push that fabric over. What you need to make sure is that you catch all the layers, and this is why basting the gusset is actually a very good idea. So we've got to the middle now. So just work your way around. Clips are lovely because sometimes they move on your machine with you. Whereas pins, you'll have stabbed yourself a dozen times by now. They have their uses and they have their place, but I'm not sure with something like this. So take your time, go all the way around. I just want to make sure that I haven't missed, because that just moved. I just caught it. Let me just take that back a bit. And this is where you might, there, got it. So this is where you might want to start at the top again, but on the other side, so you catch all of this correctly. So let me just do that, and I'm going to go actually on the top of the bag. Oh, which reminds me, I haven't undone the zip. I've done it now. Don't forget to undo your zip. So let me put another clip there just to hold it. Well, there we go. Try and make sure that you got this, keep that centre of the pouch and the centre of the gusset sitting on top of each other. It would be so easy for that to move. So just line it up again. So I'm just going to go in from the other side this time. I'll take that away. As I say, a free arm will really help you. I think I've caught it okay. So let's just move some of this debris away from my desk. Okay, so we're going to line up the raw edges of my gusset and my bag and just stitch that last little piece. I think that's okay, do check it. So that's one half done, that's all, so we haven't done all of it yet. So I'm just checking to make sure I'm happy with everything. Okay, so now we're going to stitch the other side because we've stitched this side beautifully. So now let's stitch from this top all the way around to the other side. When we get to this part here, this last couple of inches, you may want to flip it. You might find that easier. But certainly stitching on the gusset side to start with is your best option. So we're starting at the top where the zip is, on that central part there. So again, you can squidge it under your machine and line it all up, obviously, and then just work your way round. Now don't forget, you've got curves on your gusset, so don't pull and stretch. This is why basting beforehand is such a good idea. So basting all of the layers together on your gusset, is definitely a good thing to do. So let's work our way round. So make sure that your raw edges sit together. If they don't, you might find that your gusset doesn't fit. So just take it all the way around, just removing my my clips. They sometimes do get in my way, although really useful, obviously. So. Now because we're dealing with curves, you've got a smaller stitch of 2.2, something like that. It's always better on curves to have a smaller stitch. And then we're just coming back up to the top on the other side. And again, you might find it easier to turn, but if you manoeuvre it all in place, you should be fine. You're dealing with two almost, well, you aren't dealing with opposite curves, you're just dealing with curves, and then they're not always that easy to stitch, but it's all doable, it really is. So there is our gusset stitched in place. You can see what that looks like. Of course, this is the wrong side, because we're going to bind it. So what I suggest you do now is just take 5 minutes and snip all the way around to make it super neat. You might want to check on the right side of your pouch first to make sure everything has been stitched and is sitting nicely and there's no puckers. Yeah, if there are any puckers, you can always undo that little section and do it again. So just neaten it up all the way around. As I say, a zigzag stitch is perfectly acceptable. So just neaten off that top. Absolutely covered in bits now. I think we're all clear of bits. Let's have a look. Trim your threads. Now with the top of the zip, you'll find that you have got that little raw edge there, and what you can do is you can trim your fabric back and you can glue the rest of that zipper tape down, or you can put another stitch in it so you have the neatness of the zip sitting down. We didn't top stitch that zip at the top, but of course you can. I think that's what I've done with mine, yeah, and that'll help it lay flat, so you might want to do that before you put the gusset in, or you can just glue that down so it looks really neat, or you could have run your zigzag over it just to make that neat and stop the raw edges from showing. So lots of different ways you can finish that off as well. And I think in the pattern I say about top stitching that top zip, that centre zip. So let's turn it through, see what we've got. So my gusset matches my pockets. Lovely. And because we trimmed the because we trimmed the bows away, it means that our seams are nice and neat because there's no bulk there. So you can see how neat that looks, okay? And then all we need is to give it a little press and then it's good to go. But we need to put that binding in. So it's exactly the same as you would do with any binding, is that we're going to stitch one side and then we're going to flip it and hand stitch the other side to make it super neat. I'm just trying to get rid of all the threads that are on there. And that's then your pouch done. So if we open it up again, now this time I don't want you to start at the top where the zip is. I want you to start putting the binding on one of your long straight edges on the base there. Be much easier for you. So let's just trim all that away. And again, I would start on the gusset side, and all you're going to do is just think that this is one of your quilts that you're quilting. I'll just trim that back. and you're just going to start, if we look at the overhead, you're going to start putting your binding down, following your original seam line, and you're just going to stitch this down just like you would with a quilt. What you can do, of course, is start off with a folded down edge, so let's just do that. So it's a 45-degree fold, finger press, fold that back, and then the end of your binding will, let's do it the other way around because that makes sense. Let's do it that way around. And then when you come back to the beginning, the end of your binding just pops in this pocket. So let's just do that. So fold that over, fold that back, and that's how you would start stitching. Now, some people start stitching back here, but I kind of stitch from there and bring it along so this is already stable. And then when my end comes along that way, it just tucks in. You might need to open up the seam just a little bit just to tuck that in. But let's pop it onto the pouch. So I'm going to go from the gusset side again. Just make sure you don't catch any layers, that would be easy to do. So just make sure it's lying flat. And although we've trimmed back, you might want to stick to a 1/4 inch or just follow your stitching that you previously just did. Now it is a bias binding because we're going around curves, and it'll stretch lovely for you. So just take it round. You just want to make sure you don't catch the fabric, so just keep it nice and flat as best you can. And then as you come up to the top, just watch those layers again. So if you keep within your stitching line and you've checked your outer fabric and there's no puckers, then by stitching on your original stitching line you should be absolutely fine. So I'm just going to maneuver this little bit. Once you're around the curvy bit at the top there, the rest is plain sailing. Just watch your layers. Now I'm not stretching this binding at all, I'm just letting it lay flat. Obviously you've got that stretch there if you need it, but I'm allowing it just to sit on top and not stretch it. Okay, so now I'm coming to the second curve, so I'm just moving the bag around really just to help me. And as long as you follow your stitching line, you should be fine. So to do this with the binding, you know, straight off would be, I think, a little tricky. So better to join the gusset and the bag together first and then do your binding. You could hand stitch the whole thing. There's no reason why not. Okay, so we're coming to that start point. So I'm just going to cut my binding back. So I've got a little bit of spare there. And as we come up to the join, if I bring it round, you might be able to see, there's my little pocket. Well, really, this fabric doesn't really need to go right into that pocket. As long as it goes beyond that fold there, then it'll sit perfectly fine. So I'm just going to stitch it, and as we come to it, just tuck it in, and then I'm going to trim it off to about here. Okay. So, okay, so if we have a look here, so there's my end and there's the beginning. Now, I don't want this to go inside there because it just adds bulk. It's going to go in a little bit, but not a lot, but I want to go just past that, the opening, if you like. So I'm just going to take my scissors and just cut down like that, and that, if I get my stiletto, will just tuck in nicely like that. Now you could put a spot of glue on there just to hold that in place. That's not a bad idea. Let's get the glue. So put a little bit of glue on the binding. Oops, doesn't want to play for me. There we go. And then just pop it down in place. Give it a moment to take, you know, to set. There we go. And that will stick the two together quite nicely. So I won't fold that over until it's set. But if we look on the overhead, okay, so that's what it looks like now with the binding in place. So all we're going to do is take that over. Now I will definitely hand stitch this. I'm not going to put a third row of stitching around the outside of my pouch, but I'm going to sit and I'm going to hand stitch that binding in place. I think it'll look lovely, and obviously if you want to trim back any more of that seam, then you can obviously do that to make it super duper neat. And then you've got the opportunity also to trim all this back, and you could even slip stitch this down just to make it again sit really neatly and securely. So you've got a few options there, but definitely even though I didn't do it this time, top stitch that zip down. We'll have a look at the original one that I made. So that's a little job for the rest of the day, just to hand stitch that binding. A few threads as usual. So you can see it gives it a lovely curved finish. It's a lovely sort of boat shape, isn't it? Like a rocker. There we go. And there we are. So there's the bag finished. As I say, in the pattern I do a French seam, which is quite tricky. It is quite tricky, but I thought in the video I'd show you a different option. And don't forget, you could put lovely sort of hangers from your, you know, zip tidies, what are they called? Zip pretty things anyway. But now you can see the rest of the fabric, so you can see what I mean about getting pretty matching fabric. It looks amazing, doesn't it? And once that's filled with goodies, be perfect. So it could be a great Christmas present. But as I say, this curvy part here when you stitch it is a little bit of a challenge, but why not? Let's have a few challenges in life, shall we? And just do your best. And if you need me to repeat it at any time, just request and then I'll do that for you. But yeah, so a super pouch. Really happy with it. I love the chickens. And again, on here I've used checks. You need to be brave if you're using checks, because if you go wriggly, you'll see. I have top stitched the top of my zip there, so it does make a difference with the zip lying flat inside my bag. But like I say, you can trim that edge down and you can put a little dab of glue on there just to hold it, or you can do a second row stitching. But quite honestly, when you look at it, you've got lots of stitching already. You've got the top stitching of the pocket of the zip, you've got the top stitching of the binding there, so the top stitching on this zip I think is probably enough, but if you wanted to, you could just slip stitch. So you can, if I show you on the overhead, you can just pop that down flat and then just slip stitch along there just to hold it. But by the top stitching, it looks perfectly fine. But like I say, with the checks, you need to be a little bit braver because it shows if you've gone wriggly or not, as the case may be. So we've got two different looks there. We've got a sort of a country kitchen look, if you like, and we've got a really sort of, well, I took the picture of that on the beach and it matched the beach huts perfectly. So it's kind of that lovely, all those gorgeous colours, really bright and cheerful. So this pattern is called Nicola. And for my members, it's the first pattern in November, which gets launched on Monday the 6th of November 2023. It'll also go into the shop on my website, and the video will also be available on YouTube, and that's how you're watching it now. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you make loads.